Hi, my name is Molly Wisty, and I am here today to do a presentation on empowering students to find their own voice through art. And my presentation is a lot about how I run my choice-based classroom and different techniques that I use to get students to find their own voice and come up with their own ideas and develop art that's unique to them. I'm a middle school teacher in Bemidji, Minnesota, and I was originally going to present this presentation at the NAEA conference this year, so I'm glad to be able to share it with you in any way that I can. I hope that you find something useful in the presentation that you can use in your own class. I've provided you with a lot of links to my documents so that you can steal them, alter them, share them, whatever you need to do. And I'll put my contact information at the end in case you have any questions for me. My presentation today is titled Empowering Students to Find Their Voice Through Art. My name is Molly Wisty, and I teach at the Bemidji Middle School. I have taught at the middle school for 2 years now. I previously taught 3 years of elementary and 8 years of middle school before this, so I think I'm at 10 now. 2 years of high school, I taught a year of college, and then I've been TAB, or teaching for artistic behavior, for about 12 years. I'm both an artist and a teacher, and I just have some of my accomplishments on there. I was the Minnesota Middle School Art Educator of the Year in 2019-2020. I'm also a teacher leader through the Perpich Center for the Arts Rattle program. And the art that I do myself is chainsaw carving. So this is a picture of me here working on a cedar log in southern Minnesota. So I have my why on here because this is kind of why helping students find their voice is really important to me. And I know you can read it, but I'll just go ahead and read it to you. Art education is one of the last places in education where we help students to truly develop creativity. Because much of education has a predicted outcome where students are typically asked to conform, it's important that we in art education find ways to foster student voice, build student creativity, and provide a space where students can see themselves as a creative being. The workforce is changing rapidly, and creative individuals are desired, whether they're being hired or working as an entrepreneur. We have to make sure that creativity and individual voice are a big part of our visual arts programs. We need to have these discussions because we will decide the direction of art education, which will in turn affect our students' futures. So the first thing I have on here, this is a little bit of how I structure my classes. And I have this for all of my classes, but this one is for my Intro to Art at Bemidji Middle School. And I teach Intro to Art in 6th and 7th grade. So students get art in either 6th or 7th grade, and the classes are 1 quarter, 9 weeks long. So I divide them up into three 3-week sections. So phase 1 is set up as skill build and idea generate, and that's when students will start a portfolio, get ideas for their art. We work on some basic skills and techniques, and then students also complete skill builders and experiment with different materials. We'd go over like copyright and stuff with the internet. In phase 2, we start studying more art, and students develop their individual skills more. We look at what do artists make art about. We study different artists and art styles. We start self-reflection. We do some critical response work where they're kind of dissecting art and trying to pull meaning from it. They're developing their own art skills, and then they're also starting to complete themed projects. And then in phase 3, they're really starting to develop personal voice. They study artists with a strong personal voice, We kind of do that together. They make adjustments to their work. They consider feedback. They learn to explain choices that they made about their work, and they complete more self-directed work, and then prep things for the art show. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what the classes look like overall. In phase 1 for getting ideas, I really find that some of my students are great at getting ideas right away, and some of them really struggle. So I have some resources here. I show them some of these videos. Filling Your Creative Bank Account by Jake Parker is a great one because he really just lays it out. Like, what do you need to do to fill your creative bank account so that you can have ideas? The Taste Gap, this video here, is really good because especially in middle school, students are really hard on themselves. They want their art to look perfect and amazing, and when it doesn't, they get really down on themselves, and this video talks to them about how that's pretty normal for everyone, and that as you get better and better, that gap will get smaller and smaller. And then this last video, Obvious to You, Amazing to Others, is about how your ideas are more amazing than you think they are. You just think they're ordinary because they're yours, so they seem pretty familiar to you. So I'm not going to show you all these videos right now, but they're really good to get your students thinking about ideas. And I think a lot of times when you're trying to have your students come up with their own work and build their own voice, idea generation can be one of the toughest things. So these are pretty important. Another thing that I do to help students build and generate ideas is what I call warm-ups and 5 ideas. And we start these in phase 1, but we do them throughout the class. So each day when students come in, there's what I would call, or a lot of teachers would call it, a bell ringer. And there's an activity up on the board that they need to do, and it's either a warm-up or a 5 idea. A lot of my warm-ups and 5 ideas are about building creativity and idea generation. So 5 ideas, there's an example over here on the right of what a 5 ideas page looks like. So each one of these boxes has 5 ideas in it. So it might be like, I'm trying to think of some examples. 5 ideas for something you could make with foam earplugs, or 5 ideas for art you could make that tells about you, or sometimes it's like 5 ideas for how to make backpacks better. But it's all about idea generation, and they come up with pages and pages of phenomenal ideas. As far as warm-ups, some of them are about creativity, like here, design a new Doritos logo. You know, that's creative. Or design a new Patagonia logo. But then some of them I do about skills, like shade a sphere or draw a hand, and they're less about creativity. But this really helps, again, because when it comes time to make art, they have lists and lists of ideas they've come up with, and they've been asked to be creative in their warm-ups. So here's another example of 5 ideas, and I think I said this in the last one. And just so you know, I got the 5 ideas idea from Danny Gregory's podcast, Art for All. I think in the podcast he talks about 10 ideas, but my classes are kind of short, and with middle school it can be tough sometimes to get them to come up with 10. So this is exactly what it looks like when the students walk in the room. This is up on my smartboard, other than the phase 1 part. But it says 5 ideas for art you can make with foam earplugs. And then they go ahead and they get their art journal out and they start writing down their 5 ideas while I take attendance. Here's another example. When they come in, it says 5 ideas for art based on the theme moving water. So I give them themes sometimes and make them think of ideas within the theme. And I start this in phase 1. So by the time we get to phase 2, and I'm asking them to do themed projects, they've thought about it before. It's not brand new, and it doesn't kind of throw them for a loop. Here's another example of a warm-up. So they come in, it says warm-up, explain how this artist used line and color to make this portrait unique. So sometimes too they're looking at art, other people's art, and trying to figure out how or why they made it. I changed the colors on this a little bit because it looks different on my smartboard, but this is something that I have up during class. So while students are working, after they've done their 5 ideas or their warm-up, I've got this with the date. Instruction is like what I'm going to share with them. So this particular day, I was going to introduce critical response, but we were going to do one together. And I also introduced stop motion animation. Let's see what else is on here. It says what we're going to do tomorrow. It says what they need to do during studio time, and I always have have-tos and your choice. So have-tos, they have to take the utility knife quiz, they have to do a 50 color challenge, and they have to try out 1-point perspective. But then your choice, it looks like this particular day we were in phase 2 of class. So they're developing art skills and looking at different types of art. And then I usually list out daily goals and class goals over here just to keep them kind of on track. Once we're in phase 2, one of the main things that I do is I have them study the 9, which I got from Ian Sands. And I think I'll click here and show you the 9. So the 9 that Ian developed are about like, what should I make? I have no ideas, right? So even though through phase 1 I've been having them do 5 ideas and get creative with their warm-ups, the 9 are 9 different categories that all art is about or based on. You could make art about architecture. We talk about what that would be. And there's some examples in here. You could make art about landscape. And I'm going to somewhat click through these quickly because you guys all know what these are. You could make art about objects. You know, and when you go through these, you think, well, this is kind of obvious, right? But not to kids a lot of times. You could make art about portraits. Apparently I have a lot of portraits. You could make art about the figure. And with students, I go through these a little bit more in depth and talk about what art with the figure might look like. You could make art about nature. And I just show them all different types of examples just to get their brains working. You could make art about imagination. We talk specifically about what that would mean. You could make conceptual art. And then you can make non-representational art, and I kind of talk to them about non-representational versus abstract. So those are the 9. And after I go over the 9, I keep a list of what the 9 are up front. And a lot of times we reference it when students are stuck. So if a student is like, Mrs. Wisty, I really just don't have any ideas, a lot of times all it takes for me is to reference the 9, and they're like, oh, that's right, I'm going to do objects, and I'm going to draw my favorite baseball glove or whatever. It just kind of brings them back and grounds them and reminds them of what their options are. Okay, in phase 2, we do the critical response protocol from Harvard Project Zero. I can't remember what I linked here. Let me check this out. Oh, so this is a presentation that I've made with different options for critical response protocol. So some of you probably heard of this, but it takes you through these 5 questions here. What do you notice? What does it remind you of? What emotions does it have? What questions do you have, and what might it mean? So students look at different works of art. And at first we go through this together so that they know how to do it. And I think doing the critical response protocol really helps students to look more closely at art. And when they look more closely at art and think about, why did the artist make this? What could it mean? Then it helps them to know what kind of art they want to make and what kind of things they want to say. So I think this critical response protocol is a really important part of helping students find their own voice, because they're looking at other artists and what they had to say. In phase 2 and 3, students are doing themed projects, and this is what my planning sheet looks like, and I think I linked it here for you. Yeah, so I put a link in there, so if you want to steal this, you can go ahead and click the link, and then I think it's set to just view, so you'll have to make a copy for yourself. But I tried to keep it as simple as possible, but get a lot of information from them, so it's 2 pages front and back. They have to list out what their theme is, and that might be one of the 9, like it might be objects. Sometimes I give my students a theme, but a lot of times if I give a theme, I say, like, you can do my theme or you can do your own theme, because some students are really excited to do their own. These titles I have linked to my standards. So like, I try out different stuff, I explain my ideas, I develop skills, I make art, I reflect. So this first one is all about, how did you fill your creative bank account, which goes back to that video that I had students watch earlier. And I have some students that can really articulate what they did. So I have that they can write what they did, or they can circle what they did. So there's a list kind of everything that Jake Parker mentioned in that video. Then I explain my ideas. They have to say what media they are using. They have to circle elements and principles they're going to focus on, and then they sketch out 3 different composition options. And then on the back side here, for I develop skills, they have to list skills that they have and then list skills that they still think they need. So like, if they were working with clay, they might say, I know how to score slip blend, but over here on skills I need, they might write, I don't know how to add texture to the surface, or something that they have a question about. I sign the plan before they can start. And then here at number 4, they start making the art. And then later it says, I reflect. When you're halfway done with your art, you have to get feedback. Check with 2 people to get feedback, and then they write the feedback that person 1 gave them, the feedback that person 2 gave them. And then there's some instructions here. I have students turn stuff in on Seesaw. And on Seesaw, they have to turn in their feedback. They have to turn in a reflection, which I have the directions for in Seesaw, because for some reason I used to have it on the planning sheet too, and that confused them. And then they also have to turn in a photo of their project to Seesaw. This, I would say, just helps them articulate their ideas once they have them. And one of our standards is about explaining ideas, so this is a good thing for that. Okay, I also told people that I would provide them with my kind of scope and sequence, like my curriculum. So this is just a screenshot from it. But I have it linked here. And again, if you like it or you'd like to reference it for anything, you could just go ahead and make a copy of it in your own Google Drive. So I'm not going to walk you through this exactly, but here are the learning goals for the whole course, and those are based off the new Minnesota art standards. And then I've got it laid out week 1, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. So this is how I set my classes up. So from before, week 1, 2, and 3 are going to be phase 1. I don't know why this big gap is here. So they're phase 1, week 1, 2, 3. And then I go into more specifics about week 1, like what artistic behaviors are they doing, what skills are they doing, vocabulary, and what assessments are we doing. So week 1, 2, 3 specifics, then we go into phase 2, and we've got week 4, 5, 6, like daily, what do we do? And then I've got week 4, 5, 6, a little bit more specifics and what assessments are we doing. So again, it would be really boring for me to walk you through all that right now, but it's there if you want to look at it and see kind of what we do daily. Because I think one of the biggest questions I get as a tab teacher is, how do you do this? What do you do every day? Like, how does this look? So self-reflection and self-assessment, I think, is a really big part about building student voice, because having them stop and think about, like, what did I do? What do I still need to do? That really helps them develop as an artist rather than me just telling them how they did. So these are some things that I use. This one on the left here is what we call a goals sheet. And then in the middle here is a summative assessment that we do in class, but they self-assess with that. And then over here on the right are the course learning goals. And I have all these linked here so that you can have them if you want them. So course learning goals are just goals that are linked to the Minnesota art standards, but I've somewhat reworded them so they're student friendly. So I've got I develop skills here, and then student friendly language. I can show that I understand the vocabulary, skills, techniques, and methods gone over in class by using them in my work. And this is the Minnesota art standard that it was based off of. As we go throughout the class, students record their scores over here for each learning goal, because then they can decide later if they're not happy with their grade which one they want to redo or retry, because I kind of do standards-based grading. These summative assessments are exactly aligned to that learning goal sheet that I just showed you. So like this one says, I document my work. Here's the learning goal. I can document my ideas and practice through images, text, or video in my portfolio. And then I'm just asking them to look at their seesaw and then list, what have I turned in? What do I still need to add? And your work is a little bit tough to explain quickly, but your work is just like extra choice art that they've done. And then they have to give themselves a score down here. What are you at? A 4, 3, 2, or 1? So when they fill out those self-assessments, then they record them. Like that one for I document my work, they would record it right here after they've gotten it back from me and they know their score. Goals sheets. I only use these in phase 2 and 3, because phase 2 and 3, they're doing more themed projects and it's more self-directed work. So I need them to think about how they're doing. So for this goal sheet, I kind of have this thick line down the middle that divides. Over here on the left are the course learning goals, and I just make them check either I've got it or not yet for each learning goal. And it's kind of quick and simple, but it at least makes them keep reading the course learning goals over and over and think, how am I doing at these? Because otherwise it's just me looking at the learning goals and they're not thinking about them. Then on the right hand side here, we do my goal setting Monday, where they set a goal and they list what actions they will take on Monday. On Wednesday, it's a how's it going Wednesday check-in, and they list things they've done and things they still need to do down here. And on Friday, did I meet my goal? And then what's next? And honestly, when we fill these out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's 5 minutes tops. Most of them not even 5 minutes, but it's a nice check-in, and then they turn it in at the end of the week. And all of this self-assessment, like these goal sheets that they do in phase 2 and 3, we do those each week. These summative assessments that we do periodically, you can see when we do the summatives in my scope and sequence, and then them listing out how they're doing on each goal in this course learning goal sheet. They can really tell you at any time where they're at and how they're doing. Whereas if it's me assessing, they can't do that so much. So I think assessment is also really important to students developing their own voice and developing their own work because they know how they're doing and what they need to do next. So these are just a bunch of pictures from my classroom. Students that have won awards, students working on stop motion animation, printmaking. I run a very choice-based studio. These guys over here have started a knitting club, and they've been knitting a lot. Here's a link to this presentation with all of the resources and links so that you can download anything that you saw that will help you out in your classroom. You can just scan this QR code to get access to that. And also my email is on here, wisty35@gmail.com if you have any questions.